Good morning. There is good news this morning, or rather, it came out last night, and I'm only recording this morning, that Disney, Star Wars, Lucasfilm has chosen to cancel The Acolyte. It is canceled. It is done. Leslie Headland will not move forward with a new season as she very, very much wanted to. She was asking Lucasfilm to be able to continue. She wanted to use characters like Yoda. She wanted to use characters like Dark Plagueis for the continuation of her show, and she will not be doing that. And for me, it was a moment of celebration. But on the internet, on Twitter specifically, not on any other platform, but Twitter, people were really upset about this, and they were really just in mourning. Some people saying this is the worst thing that's ever happened to Star Wars, and basically attacking everybody who was negative on the show. The tweets about it were insane. If Star Wars and Disney as a company is going to continue to cater to fans who are only interested in Anakin Skywalker and his children, then it is time to let the franchise as a whole rest. There is literally no more story to tell. Genuinely feels like this is gonna be the biggest mistake Star Wars makes in decades. I hate this. Leslie Headland, the first woman to create a Star Wars series, tapped into something fresh and exciting in the fandom with season 1, and while I had my notes, she absolutely deserved a second season to let those ideas cook. We all lose with this. No, we do not. When the Acolyte started airing, I didn't even cover the trailers because I just had no interest. But eventually I got sucked into the zeitgeist that was going on about this show because it just seemed so volatile around it. And it seemed like this show in particular was a moment where people had just had enough of Star Wars, because what was keeping me away from talking about Star Wars for so long is it just felt like nothing was changes. The shows were bad, but that nothing was going to change. And I just saw everybody, like even the mainstream, were hating on this show. And it really seemed like a moment where everyone was admitting, yeah, Star Wars has just become something terrible. So I watched 3 episodes myself at the tail end of the show. The first one I thought was just par for the course for just bad Disney Plus fare. The second, I thought it was really, really horribly written on every level, and that it was really going against what Star Wars was. The third one, though, the finale of The Acolyte, I contend is the worst thing ever put to screen with the label Star Wars on it. People say The Last Jedi was the worst thing. No, I would say the worst thing I have ever seen come out with the Star Wars label on it, because it most certainly wasn't Star Wars, was the Acolyte finale, because this show is just evil. And for those of you who haven't watched it, and by the looks of this Deadline article, most of you have not, the plot of The Acolyte overall, when you take the whole thing together, is a man, a Jedi, goes to a planet. He, for 2 seconds, I'm not being hyperbolic, literally for 2 seconds, gets a glimpse where he assumes that 2 children are being abused by their mothers. And for some reason, he becomes so emotionally attached to them, he has to do everything he can to save them and take them off the planet. When he goes to try to rescue the girls who were in an abusive situation, even though the show tries to say that they weren't, one of the mothers of the girls blows up into this black butterfly, and so the Jedi kind of freaks out and kills her because he assumed the worst. And so he is responsible for the death of the mothers of these girls, which he hides for years, and Jedi will commit suicide over this event that happened. And later, when it is revealed of what actually happened, the main character, Osha, who discovers that he was responsible for her mother's death, in a very slow, gratuitous scene, chokes this guy to death. And this was supposed to be a scene of catharsis. Like, you're supposed to be rooting for her for choking this guy to death and slowly choking him to death and joining the dark side. That is what this show did. One of the themes of the show is, after years of the Star Wars being about very clear good versus evil, this is the good side, this is the bad side, the dark side is evil, that's where you give in to your lust and your emotions and your anger and your fear. This show promotes the idea that giving into anger and fear and your lusts is a good thing. And Leslie Headland has made no secret about that, and interviews behind the scenes reveal a very, very messed up mind, where she goes on to say that that it was supposed to be about breaking free from that toxic mindset that parents want to somehow help you, and that in and of itself is very, very toxic, and that she hated the character of Soul for the fact that he even then was trying to tell Osha that it was okay to kill him, and that was another way that he was taking away her agency. What is it with that darn word, agency? being misused by Hollywood. Anyway, Leslie Headland, former Harvey Weinstein personal assistant, very messed up person with no morality in real life. If you read any of the interviews with this person, if you understand what she put in the show, the complete antithesis of everything Star Wars is supposed to be, and just a horribly written, horribly acted, morally bankrupt show in general. And, Star Wars is supposed to be a property that kids can watch, and this certainly was not. But anyway, horribly awful show on every level. The worst thing I have ever seen produced about Star Wars, more damaging than even The Last Jedi. So of course I am glad that it got canned. And for this person in this tweet to say, "Oh, but it was the first woman who made a Star Wars show," it does not matter if she was male or female. She was a morally bankrupt person who created an awful show. It does not matter her gender. And if you are talking in terms of gender, I would not want to give accolades to a show just because it is the first female to write a Star Wars show if it is a horrible show. That gives women a bad name, if you want to quote the Batman and Robin quote.
Chicks like you give women a bad name.
But, yeah, I am very glad that this show got canceled. But here's the thing. Was I expecting the show to continue? No, I wasn't, because most Disney and Marvel shows on Disney Plus have not continued. They've gotten one season, and then they've moved on. But here's what is interesting, and here's what is important about this announcement is, once again, usually with shows like, say, Obi-Wan, or Miss Marvel, or Moon Knight, or Boba Fett, they just quietly won't continue those shows. They won't really say anything about them, but you just won't hear anything for years, and they won't continue. And that's how it's been with a lot of these streaming services, or at least with Disney Plus, with their shows, is they haven't done the traditional, this thing is canceled, or this thing is renewed so much. They're very specific with their choices. To announce that the Acolyte was canceled, that was very deliberate, and that was meant to send a statement, and other people on Twitter have picked this up. Okay, but it's not even just canceling it, it's that they didn't have to announce it was canceled. They couldn't have left it in limbo like basically everything else, so canceling it sends a message. We all get that, right? Right? We do get that message, and I get that message, and it is a good message, because if you've been following Disney like me lately, you see that there is a lot of change happening at that company. For years, I think that they bought into the lie that if you antagonize your fans, and if you do things on purpose to be disruptive and go against what things were, then that does not work out on any level. That does not work out financially, and Disney has had so many financial losses with bombs at the box office, and people not signing up for their streaming services, and COVID and strikes. They cannot afford to take any more losses. So this year we've seen a lot of change coming in with the company. We see that they are making steps to try to change the trajectory of their things. Like Deadpool and Wolverine is an example of a Disney-produced project that after Marvel was abandoning the source material for so long, Deadpool and Wolverine was very much about referencing the source material and trying to appeal to comic book fans. Inside Out 2 was a very safe film that everybody enjoyed. Alien Romulus is getting mixed reviews, but this is another Disney-produced project that is making good money at the box office, and is overall, even though people have mixed opinions on it, doesn't seem like it's an offense to anybody or anything like that. We see changes happening with Marvel, wanting to bring back Robert Downey Jr., and going forward with the original team that did the Avengers movies to do another Avengers movie. And so we're just seeing changes happening at Disney. I'm doing a video on this that I was already working on before this news came out, where I'm talking about how the desire is there for change, but if it actually works out creatively, that's another thing. But the point is that Disney does have the desire to change and to stop being so marred in so much controversy, that they want to move forward with crowd-pleasing pictures. And so far, they've done that this year, where they have all of the top hits at the box office. And so I think that is what is finally happening for Star Wars. And I think the reason why they very specifically did a press release saying Lucasfilm has canceled The Acolyte season 2, not going forward with that, is I think they want to send a message to people. No, we hear you loud and clear. We are not going forward with this kind of project anymore. And currently, from what I'm hearing behind the scenes at Lucasfilm, Kathleen Kennedy isn't even running the show anymore. She's officially titled as the executive producer, but she wasn't even at D23 to promote The Mandalorian and Grogu. It was just Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni, who is the co-executive right now. And I find it interesting that for years under Kathleen Kennedy, we just could not get a new Star Wars film in theaters. But finally, when Dave Filoni steps up, we get a movie coming out in theaters after all this time. Now, once again, this does not mean that we're out of the woods for Star Wars, because that doesn't mean that even if you're changing away from this direction, the direction that antagonized fans, and that was the whole thing about The Acolyte, is I said more than once, it felt like this thing was created on purpose to stir up controversy and to antagonize the old fans. And that didn't work out, because what is being said in these articles is that the reason it's being canceled is that while it started out with high viewership, it ended as the lowest viewed Star Wars project on Disney Plus. And that is a big deal. And so all these people on Twitter complaining about, why would you cancel this show? You're not even giving this show a chance. They spent so much money on this show. Like, what was it? $180 million, $25 million an episode. Like, this show was not getting the viewership. And so, of course, they could not continue with it. They just could not continue with it. All these people on Twitter who are complaining, they are not actually the majority. They could not support this show. But I'm like, why would you want to support this show? I've heard people say it's because it was set in time that was the High Republic and it's not based on the Skywalkers. Sure, that doesn't make the show good, though. This was the worst thing I had ever seen produced from Star Wars. And that's the ultimate reason why Disney and Lucasfilm is not moving forward for it, is that they've realized that these people on Twitter who shill for these shows and call people names over not liking them, they're not the majority. They are not the people who are making these shows successful. These shows just fail. There is not an audience out there for these shows, even though for years they have desperately tried to find a different audience for Star Wars in these people who sit on Twitter and who claim that these things are good and who disparage anyone who disagrees. There is no actual audience there for these things. And I think that Disney and Lucasfilm have realized that, and that's why they're moving away. Now, back to what I was saying, that does not mean that things are going to be better written for Star Wars, because they're going with The Mandalorian and Grogu. And The Mandalorian is a show that I know it was more successful, so that's kind of a plus to go to the thing that was more successful. But I think that it's run its course, especially now. I don't know what you could really do with a Mandalorian movie. Jon Favreau, I haven't heard anything bad about him as a person, but he hasn't done a movie I've really enjoyed since Iron Man, and especially the Lion King and Jungle Book films I found excessively boring. So that doesn't mean that we're out of the woods, and I think that you need just a spectacular Star Wars project to bring anybody on board after all of this misery. But all of that said, here is the positive thing about The Acolyte getting canceled and having the announcement. It's the same thing I felt when it was airing and having so many people come forward and be like, this is just terrible, is I feel the tide is turning. I feel that the tide is turning with people just being open and honest that Star Wars has been destroyed. It's gone in a very bad direction. It's not what we liked about it. And I feel that Disney as a company as a whole is pivoting away from these lies that if they try to chase away their old audience and find a new one, that's somehow going to work. They are pivoting away from deliberately trying to antagonize their fans. And we're seeing that with Marvel once again, trying to do things that appeal to their fans. We're seeing that with Disney Pixar. And we are seeing that with Lucasfilm, where I think they are pivoting away from people like Leslie Headland, who are going to disparage people who want to stick to what George Lucas had in mind for the show. They are seeing that that is not profitable for them anymore. And so The Acolyte is just a big sign of the big shift that Disney and the industry as a whole is having right now. And it'll take time to ever recover from this. So, like, will we ever recover Star Wars? Because the damage has clearly been done so far, and some people are still saying that they don't ever want to come back to it. but at least the antagonism and the fighting and the infighting from fans is starting to stop. And like, I don't want to hear all of these tweets from people who bemoan the Acolyte. Like, what you would have gotten from a season 2 is more destruction for the Star Wars lore, even more shrinking of the Star Wars fan base, and more antagonism. Because I've said this in videos before, I'm tired about how politicized the discourse around Star Wars has been. I miss it when the biggest controversy around Star Wars would be, is Rey the daughter of Luke or the granddaughter of Obi-Wan? And that was the biggest controversy. I don't like it that Star Wars has become a pawn in this political war when it used to be something for everyone to enjoy. And I think that Disney themselves is realizing that it needs to be something for everyone again as well. And that's why they are pivoting away from these people, and they should pay no mind to these people on Twitter, because they could not make that show successful. These people, if they really wanted to see a season 2 of The Acolyte, then they would come out in greater numbers, but they did not. And I'm wondering how many of these people even watched the show on there. But anyway, and I would also like to say people better take this as a win, because I'll give you an example. You know, sometimes bad shows like this don't end. Like they did the awful Harley Quinn show for my favorite character, and that show is still going on. So just appreciate that The Acolyte is only one season. It has been so rejected by everyone. It is not going to be considered canon in any way, shape, or form. It should just be considered the awful thing that maybe woke people up behind the scenes that this is not a good direction to take any franchise. But that is all I got for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching. I do all these videos all by myself, so if you want to support me, check out my Patreon page, as these 10 wonderful people have done, and I will see you very soon with more videos. And I would want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Do you believe that Star Wars can turn around? Do you see what I'm seeing, that Disney is turning around? Once again, let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you guys next time.